The office smelled of old paper, cold metal, and quiet light. Senior classifier Velerin Saul preferred it that way. He had spent 31 years inside the Bureau of Sentient Assessment, and in those 31 years he had learned a simple truth. The best thinking happened in rooms that did not try to impress anyone. No windows, no decorative plants from distant moons, no artificial waterfalls whispering in the corner to remind visitors that the Bureau could afford beauty. Just shelves of physical records, pale walls, humming machines, and the soft glow of data screens. Velerin trusted rooms like this. They were honest rooms. They did not flatter. They did not distract. They simply waited for the mind to do its work. He sat behind his narrow desk, adjusted the cuffs of his gray bureau robe, and opened the file that had arrived from Survey Division 6 hours earlier. The title appeared in clean white letters. Planetary Species Review, Earth. Velerin read the name twice. Earth. Third planet from a yellow star. 1 moon. High water coverage. Oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere. Stable magnetic field. Biosphere dense, violent, and highly competitive. He made a small approving sound at the atmosphere note. Breathable atmospheres were always a relief. Of the 62 intelligent species Velerin had catalogued in his career, 41 breathed something that would dissolve his lungs from the inside within minutes. He appreciated species that did not require sealed rooms. He scrolled down. Dominant species, human. The word looked soft on the page. Human. It had a roundness to it, a harmless shape. Nothing in the sound suggested claws, venom, acid blood, or predatory song. Velerin had learned not to trust names too much. Some of the most terrifying-sounding species in the archive had turned out to be slow-moving herbivores with nervous temperaments and beautiful weaving traditions. He began reading. Bipedal. Bilateral symmetry. Average adult height between 1.5 and 1.9 meters. Lifespan roughly 70 to 90 local years. Velerin paused there. Short. Almost aggressively short. A candle compared to a star. He made a note. Short lifespan may contribute to accelerated cultural urgency. That was common enough. Short-lived species often moved quickly. They built fast, loved fast, feared fast, and made decisions with an intensity that longer-lived civilizations sometimes mistook for instability. He continued. Warm-blooded, social, tool-using, highly vocal, language diversity extreme. More than 6,000 active or recently active languages recorded. That interested him. 6,000 languages meant fragmentation, but not necessarily weakness. It meant isolated development, regional identity, cultural density. He opened a secondary panel and reviewed cultural markers. Art, music, paintings, sculpture, architecture, ceremonial clothing, stories told across generations. Velerin leaned back slightly. Good. Species that made beautiful useless things were usually worth talking to. Beauty without immediate function indicated imagination, abstraction, emotional depth. It suggested a mind capable of valuing more than survival. He had always considered that a hopeful sign. Then he reached the section marked conflict history. His hand slowed. Every planetary assessment had such a section. It was never pleasant, but it was rarely surprising. Conflict was common among intelligent species. Tribes fought tribes. Settlements fought settlements. Nations formed, expanded, collided, collapsed. Early civilization was messy. That was not alarming by itself. War was a phase. That was the official bureau position. The data supported it. Of the 62 intelligent species Velerin had assessed, 59 had experienced organized violence in their early development. 48 had nearly destroyed themselves at least once before reaching stable global governance. 31 had used atomic or equivalent weapons before maturing into peaceful interstellar partners. Violence in the Bureau's framework was a childhood fever. Dangerous, yes, but temporary. You survived it. You learned from it. You grew out of it. Velerin read the human conflict summary. The list was long, very long. Stone Age violence, tribal raids, Bronze Age conquest, empire wars, religious wars, resource wars, colonial wars, industrial wars, global wars, ideological wars, civil wars, proxy wars, insurgencies, revolutions, border conflicts, Cold Wars, terror campaigns, digital warfare, economic warfare. He frowned slightly, not because the violence existed, because of the continuity. Still, context mattered. Humans were not yet unified. Their planet remained politically divided. That explained much of the conflict persistence. He made another note. Species remains in late conflict phase. Violence culturally reinforced by political fragmentation. Likely to self-correct under stable external contact. He liked the sentence. It was clean, accurate, responsible. He continued reading. Technological markers were promising. Nuclear energy, global communication networks, orbital satellites, crewed lunar landing, early planetary defense systems, experimental deep space probes, primitive but growing off-world infrastructure. They had reached their moon. Velerin opened the lunar record and examined the images. There they were. Footprints, tiny depressions in gray dust, left by fragile creatures who had climbed out of their atmosphere in machines barely worthy of the name, crossed empty space, touched another world, and left marks behind. Velerin felt something almost like fondness. You did not go to your moon unless something inside you needed to know what was there. Curious species were dangerous in small ways but valuable in large ones. He began composing his recommendation. The human species presents as a mid-development civilization in the late conflict phase of social evolution. Aggression appears culturally produced and context-dependent rather than biologically fixed. Despite ongoing internal division, humans demonstrate strong markers for creative intelligence, social bonding, symbolic reasoning, and rapid technological adaptability. He paused, then added, recommendation, initiate controlled first contact. Offer provisional diplomatic recognition with eventual eligibility for full quorum membership. He read the assessment twice. Good, measured, fair. The kind of report that would pass through council review without difficulty. He submitted it. In the adjoining analysis room, Junior Specialist Mara Eth received the submission notification and stared at it for longer than she should have. She respected Velerin Sol. Everyone did. He had classified more emerging civilizations than anyone currently alive in the Bureau. His reports were elegant, balanced, and almost always correct. Mara was not the sort of person who challenged senior conclusions lightly. But there was one section of the Earth file she could not stop thinking about. Not the wars. Not the nuclear weapons. Not the thousands of languages. The shoulder. She opened the biological survey again and pulled up the human musculoskeletal model. There it was, rotating slowly in blue-white light. The human shoulder joint. Mara leaned closer. She had studied comparative xenobiology before joining the Bureau. 43 known intelligent species. Hundreds of presentient tool users. Thousands of animal analogs across surveyed worlds. She had never seen a shoulder like this. The range of motion was extraordinary. The joint could rotate with unusual freedom while remaining stable under violent acceleration. The surrounding muscles were dense, layered, and arranged in a configuration that was not merely flexible. It was specialized. Mara disliked that word. Specialized implied evolutionary pressure. Purpose. She opened the kinetic simulation. The human arm moved. Shoulder rotated. Torso twisted. Elbow extended. Wrist snapped forward. The projected object left the hand at terrifying speed. Mara stared. She ran the simulation again. Then again. The result did not change. Humans were not merely capable of throwing. They were optimized for it. By a significant margin, they possessed the most efficient biological projectile system Mara had ever seen in a bipedal intelligent species. The nearest comparison in the archive could throw at roughly half the velocity and a quarter of the accuracy. Mara sat back slowly. Throwing was not automatically alarming. Many species threw things. Food, tools, nesting material. Objects they wanted moved from one place to another. But optimization required context. What had humans thrown? And for how long? She opened the archaeological record. The answer was waiting for her in stone. 2 million years. Mara did not move for several seconds. Then she whispered, though there was no one in the room to hear her. That cannot be right. She checked the data source. Then another. Then another. It was right. Long before cities, before writing, before agriculture, before permanent nations, before humans had built temples or ships or laws, they had thrown things. Not casually. Not playfully. Accurately. With purpose. Prey. Predators. At each other. Mara pulled up associated biological notes. Pain tolerance. Stress response. Reflex speed. Endurance capacity. Several minor flags appeared. Nothing urgent individually. Nothing that would overturn Velarin's assessment. But together they made the room feel colder. She wrote a short addendum. Carefully. Respectfully. Not a challenge. A note. Addendum to Earth Species Review. Human upper limb morphology indicates extreme projectile optimization. Archaeological record suggests aimed throwing behavior predates civilization markers by approximately 2 million local years. Recommend additional review of prelinguistic conflict behavior and endurance hunting patterns. She attached the shoulder analysis, the kinetic simulations, and 3 secondary notes on pain tolerance and stress chemistry. Then she submitted it to the general file. For a moment, she considered sending it directly to Velarin. Then she decided against it. He would see it if it mattered. Mara closed the file, stood, and went to lunch. Behind her, the human skeleton continued rotating silently on the screen. Arm drawn back, shoulder loaded, ready to throw. The Quorum Council chamber was designed to feel inevitable. Velarin Sol had always thought that was the most accurate way to describe it. Not large, though it was enormous. Not impressive, though it had been built at a cost that could have funded 3 colony worlds. Inevitable. The room curved inward at the top, its pale walls arching like the inside of a vast shell. The ceiling vanished into a controlled haze of light, engineered so that no one could quite judge how high it went. The effect was subtle but precise. Every species that entered the chamber felt, in some small and difficult-to-name way, that they were inside something older and larger than themselves. At the center stood the speaking platform. Around it, in a perfect circle, sat the 14 representatives of the Quorum, 7 species, each with 2 voices in the matter of new civilizations. Velarin stood on the platform now, his hands folded calmly behind his back. He was not nervous. He had presented in this chamber many times before. 31 years of correct work had burned nervousness out of him the way repeated friction smooths a stone. He began. Designation, Earth. 3rd planet of the Sol system. Dominant species, human. His voice carried cleanly through the chamber. He spoke without rushing. He did not dramatize. He did not simplify. He simply laid the data out in the order it made sense. Atmospheric composition, biological diversity, technological development, cultural markers. He showed the images. Cities at night, light patterns spreading across continents like neural networks, satellites circling the planet in dense constellations, the moon, marked with faint human footprints that had not yet faded. He allowed a brief pause after that image. He had learned long ago that silence, used correctly, did half the work of persuasion. They are pre-interstellar, he continued, but progressing toward it. Estimated independent system reach within 1 to 2 generations. A representative from the Velkai inclined their head slightly. Awareness of external intelligence? No confirmed evidence, Velarin said, though observational anomalies suggest they may suspect non-local phenomena. Conflict status? Asked one of the Laurenti. Velarin did not hesitate. Ongoing, fragmented across political boundaries. However, he lifted a hand slightly, guiding the conversation, consistent with late-phase development patterns observed in 59 of 62 catalogued intelligent species. That settled the tone of the room. Several representatives leaned back. Not relaxed, but familiar. This was territory they understood. Velarin continued. Human aggression appears culturally reinforced rather than biologically fixed. Their conflict behavior aligns with expected transitional instability prior to large-scale cooperative integration. He brought up a graph. Conflict intensity over time. Peaks and declines. Cycles narrowing. Projection indicates self-correction under sufficient external stability and diplomatic engagement. A pause. Then the question Velerin knew would come. Are they dangerous? It came from the second eighth representative, voice calm, almost curious. Velerin answered the way he always answered. Every intelligent species is dangerous, he said. That is, in many ways, a definition of intelligence. The relevant question is not capacity, but direction. He let that settle. Humans retain a measurable capacity for violence, he continued, but demonstrate equal or greater capacity for cooperation, creativity, and adaptive problem-solving. Their trajectory is positive. He ended simply. I recommend controlled first contact, with a pathway to full quorum membership. Silence followed. Not empty silence. Evaluative silence. The kind that measured weight. Then the questions began. Technological adaptability? High. Resource consumption patterns? Expanding, but not yet destabilizing at planetary scale. Internal cohesion? Fragmented, but improving under global communication networks. Probability of hostile response to contact? Velerin paused only briefly. Low. That word settled heavily into the chamber. Not because it was bold, because it was measured. Velerin did not deal in absolutes. Low meant low. The representatives exchanged glances, different species, different anatomies, but the same underlying behavior. Agreement forming. The vote was called. 7 species. 14 voices. 9 in favor. 5 opposed. The decision passed. The sole contact initiative would proceed. A diplomatic vessel would be prepared and dispatched within the quarter cycle. Standard protocol. Peaceful broadcast. Translation interface. Controlled approach. Offer of dialogue. If humans responded positively, integration would begin. If they responded with aggression, the vessel would withdraw, and long-term observation would replace direct engagement. It was a process refined over 4 centuries. It worked. The meeting concluded. Representatives rose. Conversations began in low tones. Velerin stepped down from the platform and moved toward the exit, his mind already turning to the next file. Behind him, unnoticed by most, a small notification icon pulsed quietly on his personal display. Addendum attached to submitted report. He almost dismissed it. Almost. He had other work waiting. Several pending assessments. A resource allocation review. 2 internal audits that would require careful attention. Addendums from junior analysts were common. Usually minor. Usually unnecessary. But something he would not later be able to name what made him pause. He opened it. The file expanded in front of him. Addendum Human Upper Limb Kinetics. Velerin frowned slightly. He began reading. The language was careful, respectful, non-confrontational. Mara Eth's work was always like that. She did not overstate. She did not speculate beyond the data. She simply placed information where it could be seen. He read the first paragraph. Then the second. Then he slowed. He read the section on the shoulder joint. Once. Twice. The words did not change. Optimization for throwing. Velerin felt something shift. Faint and almost imperceptible. Somewhere behind his calm. He continued. Archaeological record. 2 million years. Aimed throws. Calculated throws. Throws at moving targets. Throws at threats. He stopped reading. Not because he had finished. Because the words had begun to sit differently in his mind. Throwing was not alarming. He knew that. Many species threw. It was useful. It was efficient. It was... He searched for the word. Normal. But 2 million years was not normal. That was not a behavior that appeared late. That was not a tool learned after intelligence developed. That was something older. He reopened the file. He read the note on pain tolerance. Higher than average. Significantly higher. He read the note on reflex speed. Above expected range. He read the note on stress response. He slowed again. Under extreme threat, most organisms degraded. They froze. They collapsed. They lost function. Humans did not. Their stress response spiked, and then cleared, rapidly. What should have overwhelmed them became usable. Fuel. The human term appeared in the translation. Adrenaline. Velerin repeated the word silently. He had no exact equivalent in Eighth. The concept existed. The intensity did not. He closed the file, then opened it again. The room felt slightly different. Not colder. Not darker. Just shifted. He leaned back in his chair and looked at nothing for a long time. Then, slowly, he opened a new document. He marked it as personal research. Not for submission. Not for review. Just a question. He typed a single line. At what point does a behavior stop being cultural and become structural? He stared at it. Then added another. At what point does conflict stop being a phase and become a foundation? He saved the file, closed it, and told himself, with the quiet certainty of a man who had been right for 31 years, that it probably did not matter. The decision had already been made. First contact would proceed. Humanity would be welcomed, and like every other species before them, they would grow. They would stabilize. They would leave their violent past behind. That was how it worked. It had always worked that way. Across the station, in a smaller office filled with dim light and unfinished thoughts, Mara Eth sat at her desk and stared at nothing. She had not expected Velerin to read the addendum immediately. She had not expected anything to come of it at all. It was a note, a detail, a small irregularity in a larger, stable picture. And yet, she could not stop thinking about it. 2 million years. She whispered the number again, as if saying it aloud might make it smaller. It did not. She turned back to her screen. The human skeleton waited for her. Arm raised, joint rotating, perfectly balanced. She ran the simulation one more time. The motion was smooth, efficient, precise. The projectile left the hand with lethal speed. Mara watched it travel across the virtual space and strike its target exactly where intended. No hesitation, no correction, just execution. She closed the simulation, and for the first time since joining the Bureau, she found herself wishing, quietly, irrationally, that the file in front of her was wrong. It was not, and somewhere far beyond the station, around a yellow star that did not yet know it was being watched, a species that had been throwing things for 2 million years continued doing exactly what it had always done. Learning, adapting, and getting better. The contact vessel was named Harmonic Reach. It was not the largest ship in the Quorum fleet, nor the fastest, nor the most heavily shielded. It was, however, the most carefully constructed for a single purpose: meeting the unknown without turning it into an enemy. Its hull was smooth and pale, designed to reflect light rather than absorb it. Its weapon systems were minimal and recessed, hidden behind layered plating so that no first scan would interpret its presence as a threat. Its signal arrays were the most advanced the Quorum possessed, capable of transmitting across a spectrum wide enough to speak, in theory, to anything that could think. Inside, everything was calibrated. Temperature adjusted to a neutral median comfortable to the majority of known biologies. Lighting soft, non-directional. Gravity stable. Air composition flexible across multiple sealed zones. It was a ship designed not for war, but for trust. Ambassador Taris Vel stood at the central observation window as the Sol system grew slowly larger ahead of them. She had spent 30 years doing this. First contact. 30 years of walking into rooms where no one knew her language, her history, or her intentions, and leaving those rooms with agreements, alliances, shared understanding. She had never failed. Not once. Her record was perfect. Behind her, the diplomatic team moved quietly through their preparations. 6 individuals, each selected for specific expertise: linguistics, cultural analysis, biological safety, signal interpretation, behavioral modeling. They had done this before. They would do it again. Translation matrix? Taris asked without turning. Ready, said Leth Karan from the communications station. Compiled from all intercepted human transmissions. Broadcast media, radio signals, digital archives. We've processed approximately 12% of their total information network. 12%, Taris repeated mildly. It's a lot, Leth admitted. They produce an extraordinary volume of data. Much of it appears to be argument. Taris allowed the smallest hint of amusement. Argument suggests engagement, she said. Engagement suggests thought. Some of it is about food, Leth added. That also suggests thought. A few quiet smiles moved through the room. The tension eased. That was part of the process too. Normalize the unknown. Reduce it to patterns. Make it understandable. Outside the ship, the blue-white sphere of Earth turned slowly in the distance. Beautiful. Fragile. Alive. Taris studied it for a long moment. Then she spoke. Begin broadcast. The harmonic reach transmitted its message across every frequency it could reasonably assume humans might detect. The message was carefully constructed. 12 points. Clear. Structured. Non-threatening. It introduced the quorum. It expressed peaceful intent. It acknowledged the autonomy of the human species. It offered dialogue. And at its center, one word carried the emotional weight of the entire message. Velen. In eighth, it meant something close to, we extend ourselves toward you in hope. It was one of the warmest words in the language. It appeared in poetry, in vows, in the quiet moments when one being chose to trust another. The translators had worked carefully. They rendered it into human languages as, we reach for you. The message spread, across satellites, across ground stations, across cables buried beneath oceans, across networks that wrapped the planet like a second nervous system. Within minutes, it reached people who made decisions. Within hours, it reached people who did not. On Earth, the response began immediately. It did not look like a response. First, it looked like confusion. In Nairobi, a systems analyst named Amina Khatri stared at her screen and said, very quietly, that's not a satellite. Her supervisor leaned over her shoulder. It's not debris either, he said after a moment. Too controlled. Too deliberate. They called someone. That someone called someone else. Within 4 hours, the data had moved through 17 layers of authority across 6 different governments. Rooms filled. Lights stayed on. Maps appeared. Not one of those rooms assumed the object was friendly. They did not panic. They did not broadcast fear. They did what their species had always done when something unknown appeared in their environment. They prepared. 6 hours after the broadcast, military systems across multiple continents shifted, quietly, into elevated readiness. No public announcements. No declarations. Just movement. Satellites repositioned. Defense networks recalibrated. Communication channels secured. On the harmonic reach, the quorum sensors recorded the pattern. 17 governments responding, Leth reported. 6-hour window. Coordinated escalation of defensive posture. Taris nodded. Expected, she said. Expected? One of the junior analysts asked, unable to hide their surprise. Unknown contact produces caution, Taris replied. Caution produces preparation. Preparation is not aggression. She believed that. She had seen it before. Many times. The message would be received, interpreted, questioned, then answered. It always followed that pattern. On Earth, the interpretation phase did not go as expected. The problem was not the structure of the message. It was the nuance. Human languages were not direct mirrors of eighth. They carried weight differently, emotion differently, intent differently. The translators were excellent at words. They were not excellent at meaning. In English, Mandarin, Arabic, Russian, and several other major languages, one phrase in particular landed badly. We reach for you. It sounded wrong. Not overtly hostile. Not explicitly threatening. But close enough. Close enough to something else. Something instinctive. Something that did not need translation. In multiple government briefing rooms across different continents, in different languages, different cultures, different histories, people had the same reaction. A small shift. A tightening. A quiet, shared thought that no one said out loud. That sounds like a move you make before you grab something. 15 of the 17 responding governments escalated their readiness posture without issuing a single direct command. It happened automatically. The way breathing happens. The way flinching happens. The way a body prepares for impact before the mind finishes processing what it is seeing. On the harmonic reach, the data was categorized, filed, labeled. Immature civilizational response, within expected parameters. The classification passed through automated systems. No one flagged it for priority review. Not yet. Ambassador Tari's Vel prepared for the next step. Direct contact. She selected a controlled approach point just beyond Earth's primary orbital defense range. Far enough to avoid immediate threat perception, close enough to signal intent. Prepare shuttle protocols, she said. We're not waiting for a response? Leth asked. We are responding, Tari said calmly. Silence is part of the conversation. 12 hours after the initial broadcast, something unexpected happened. A human vessel approached. It was not large. It was not elegant. It did not match any known quorum design standard. In fact, the first engineering assessment described it as structurally concerning. It looks like it was assembled from multiple incompatible systems, one of the analysts said, staring at the scan. And yet it's holding together, another replied. Barely. And moving faster than it should. That was the part that mattered. The vessel's propulsion signature did not align with the projected technological level in Velarin's report. Not by a small margin. By a meaningful one. It was not faster than light. But it was close. Close enough that several engineers checked their instruments twice. Single occupant, Leth reported. No detectable weapons systems. Minimal shielding. Tari's considered that, then nodded. Grant docking permission. The shuttle approached without hesitation. No evasive maneuvers. No broadcast of intent. No visible fear. It aligned with the harmonic reach's docking port with precise, almost casual accuracy. Confident, one of the analysts murmured. Or unaware, another suggested. Tari said nothing. She watched. The airlock cycled. Pressure equalized. The inner door opened, and a human walked onto the quorum vessel. Commander Daniel Oei was not physically imposing. Medium height, compact build, dark hair, eyes that moved carefully, deliberately, taking in the room without rushing. What struck Tari's immediately was not his appearance. It was his posture. He walked the way someone walks into a space they have already decided they understand. Not arrogant, not aggressive, just certain. He stopped at a polite distance, looked directly at her, and spoke. Ambassador, he said. The translator rendered it cleanly. Tari's inclined her head. Commander, she replied. The first minutes went smoothly. Names, titles, basic acknowledgments. The careful, circular language of two sides establishing a shared frame of reference. The translator held. Not perfectly, but well enough. Then Oei asked a question. The word in your message, he said. Velen. What does it mean? Tari's answered without hesitation. It expresses goodwill, she said. Hope, an opening of hands, a desire to connect. Oei watched her, not interrupting, not reacting immediately. Then he asked another question. And if we had said no? Tari's blinked, just once. If you had declined contact, she said carefully, the quorum would have respected that decision and withdrawn to observe from a distance until your species was ready. Oei repeated the phrase. Withdrawn to observe. Something in the room shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically, just slightly. Come again, he said, voice still calm. Withdrawn to observe. Tari's nodded. Yes. Oei leaned forward just a fraction. How long? He asked. Have you been observing us? Tari's answered honestly. 6 of your years. The silence that followed was different from any silence Tari's had encountered in 30 years of diplomacy. It was not confusion. It was not hesitation. It was focused. Oei spoke again. Did you see anything? He asked. That suggested we wanted to be observed? Tari's opened her mouth to answer. She had a good answer. A standard answer. Protocol. Safety. Non-interference. She had used it before. It had always worked. But something about the way he asked the question changed its shape. Before she could speak, OAE continued. You watched us, he said, still calm, still precise, without our knowledge or consent, for 6 years. Then you sent a message that, depending on how it's read, sounds like a threat. And now you want to offer us membership in your organization. He paused. Not for effect, for accuracy. I need you, he said, to explain why I should not interpret that as an act of aggression. For the first time in 30 years, Ambassador Tari's Vel did not have an answer ready. She reached for language, for structure, for something that would restore the familiar shape of a first contact conversation. We did not intend harm to your people, she said. The translator processed the sentence, adjusted, rendered. What reached Commander OAE's earpiece was, your people were not the target. The conversation did not recover. It unraveled, not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily. Small misalignments, a gesture interpreted incorrectly, pause read as judgment, a phrase that landed just slightly wrong, each one minor, each one survivable. Together they accumulated. For hours later, the meeting ended. No agreement, no shared understanding, no foundation for continued dialogue. Commander Daniel OAE stood, inclined his head, and left. As the shuttle detached and moved away from the harmonic reach, Tari stood in the observation chamber and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not failure, not yet, but the possibility of it. Behind her, the ship's systems continued their quiet work, recording, analyzing, filing, and somewhere deep in the Bureau's network, Velerin Sol's personal research notes sat open on his screen, waiting for an answer he had not yet found. The question remained unchanged. At what point does a species stop reacting and start recognizing? The report reached Fleet Command within the hour. It did not look dramatic. No alarms, no red markings, just a clean, structured document summarizing a failed diplomatic engagement. But to Fleet Commander Davith Orin, it read like geometry. And geometry, to him, was truth. He stood in the command gallery of the Quorum flagship, a vast chamber of layered displays and quiet calculations. He had never been a diplomat, and he had never pretended to understand diplomacy. Words shifted, meanings bent, intent hid inside phrasing. Geometry did not. Distance, velocity, mass, force. These things did not lie. He read the report again. First contact. Failed. Communication. Compromised by translation instability. Human response. Defensive posture escalation across multiple planetary authorities. Interpretation. Potential hostility. He tapped a command. Human readiness patterns appeared on the central display. 17 governments. 6 hours. Defense systems elevated. Communication channels encrypted. No panic. No visible collapse. Just preparation. Orin narrowed his eyes slightly. Efficient, he said. Coordinated, added one of his officers. Instinctive, said another. Orin nodded once. He did not like instinctive. Instinctive responses were not negotiated. They were acted upon. He brought up the fleet comparison. Quorum vessels in operational range, 4,000. Human vessels detected, 40. The numbers settled the room. They always did. The math was clean. It had been clean for 400 years. Every conflict the Quorum had engaged in could be reduced to numbers that made sense. Superior force applied at the correct point produced predictable outcomes. Orin trusted that. It had never failed him. He turned back to the report. There was a line buried in the diplomatic summary that caught his attention. Human representative questioned observational practices and interpreted Quorum monitoring as potential aggression. Orin considered that, then dismissed it. Misinterpretation. Immature species often reacted poorly to observation. They lacked the broader context. They did not understand that observation prevented conflict rather than caused it. Still, he looked again at the readiness data. 17 governments, 6 hours. No central command. No delay. That was not confusion. That was a pattern. Orin spoke. Remove the ambiguity. The officers around him went still. One of them asked, carefully, Commander. Orin gestured to the display. They are preparing for conflict because they do not understand the balance of power, he said. We correct that. How? Orin did not hesitate. One demonstration, he said. Clear, controlled, non-lethal to population centers. He expanded the Sol system map. His finger hovered for a moment, then settled. Lunar surface, he said. Uninhabited, visible from their planet. We strike once. Silence. Then, they may interpret that as escalation, one officer said. They already are escalating, Orin replied. They have not fired, the officer pressed. They have armed, Orin said. Preparation is a form of engagement. He turned, looking at them fully now. We do not destroy them, he said. We do not target population centers. We do not engage their vessels directly. We demonstrate capability. We make the geometry clear. And then, they will understand, Orin said simply. They will request terms. The room remained quiet, not because the plan was unclear, because it was familiar. This was how it worked. It had always worked. A smaller power tested the boundaries. A larger power clarified them. Conflict ended before it truly began. One of the senior officers spoke. And if they do not request terms? Orin did not look away from the display. They will, he said. The statement was not arrogance. It was history. The proposal moved up the chain. Through command. Through review. To the council. The discussion was brief. The math was clean. The precedent was absolute. 9 in favor. 4 opposed. The motion passed. At 0347 Greenwich Mean Time, the strike was executed. From Earth, it appeared as a sudden bloom of light on the dark face of the moon. A silent flash, bright enough to be seen with the naked eye. Then darkness again. Where there had been gray dust and ancient stillness, there was now a crater the size of a small city. On the harmonic reach, the sensors recorded everything. Energy output, impact dispersion, thermal signature, all within controlled parameters. All exactly as planned. They turned their attention to Earth. They expected noise, emergency broadcasts, uncoordinated communication spikes, the chaotic signal patterns of a civilization that had just realized it was not alone, and not safe. Instead, they received silence. Not total silence. The systems detected massive communication traffic. Encrypted, directed, purposeful, but none of it was public. None of it was visible. No open panic. No global broadcast. No disorganized response. 22 hours passed. 22 hours of a species speaking very quickly and very quietly to itself. On the command deck, one of the analysts shifted uneasily. This is not typical, they said. Orin did not look concerned. This is calculation, he said. They are arriving at the correct conclusion. And that is, that they cannot win. The analyst nodded slowly. Yes, that made sense. It had to. On Earth, those 22 hours were not quiet. They were the loudest 22 hours in human history. But only to those inside them. In underground command centers, in secure facilities, in rooms where decisions carried weight, people spoke in low voices over maps filled with shifting data. The strike had been seen, recorded, measured, interpreted. It had not been misunderstood. Not once. No one called it an accident. No one called it a warning. They called it what it was. A demonstration. And they answered it the only way they knew how. They prepared. Factories that had been idle accelerated. Shipyards that had been experimental became operational. Prototypes moved from theory to production. Military doctrines, decades old, carefully constructed, were opened, questioned, rewritten. Across nations that had been rivals days before, information flowed. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but faster than it ever had before. Old conflicts paused. Not resolved. Just set aside. There were larger things now. On the 23rd hour, the silence broke. Not with a message. With a ship. Quorum picket vessels registered the contact first. Small. Fast. Moving in a way that did not match expected human capability. Velocity reading? An officer asked. Confirmed? The analyst replied, voice tightening slightly. It's close. Close to what? Close to something they should not have yet. The ship did not slow. It did not evade. It did not broadcast. Passed through the picket line not by force, but by absence. It moved through gaps as if it had always known where they would be. Onboard sensors tried to track it, tried to predict it, failed. The ship did not behave like a target. It behaved like a decision already made. It stopped in front of the harmonic reach. Scans were immediate. Single occupant, came the report. No weapons. No significant shielding. Minimal crew mass, confirmed one individual. The room went still. Oren watched the data, then said, quietly, let him through. On the harmonic reach, Ambassador Tari's Vel stood once again at the airlock. She had not slept. Not properly. Not since the strike. She had reviewed the failed conversation with Commander OA 6 times. Every word. Every pause. Every misalignment. She knew where it had broken. She did not know how to fix it. The airlock opened. A human stepped through. Not OA. Different. Older, perhaps. Or simply shaped by different experiences. He walked forward with the same calm certainty. The same absence of visible tension. His hands. Tari's noticed them immediately. Still. Completely still. He stopped at the same polite distance. Looked at her. And spoke. His eighth was broken. Accented. Painful to hear. But understandable. I request, he said carefully, to speak with whoever is in charge. Tari's studied him for a moment. Then nodded. I am, she said. The human inclined his head slightly. Acknowledgement. Respect. Then he said something that did not belong in any first contact protocol. We saw what you did to our moon. No anger. No raised voice. Just fact. Tari's held his gaze. Yes, she said. A pause. The human nodded once, as if confirming something internally. Then he said, good. The word landed wrong. Not aggressive. Not hostile. Just incorrect. Tari's felt the conversation shifting again. Just slightly. Just enough to matter. What do you mean? She asked. The human's eyes did not move. It means, he said. Now we know what kind of conversation we're having. Silence settled between them. Not empty. Not uncertain. Defined. Clear. And somewhere, far from this room, in a quiet office filled with old paper and cold light, Velerin Sol stared at the data stream coming in from the Sol system. The human response patterns. The fleet movement. The production rates. The tactical adjustments. Something inside him, something older than his training, older than his certainty, shifted. He opened Mara Eth's report again. His eyes moved to a single line. 2 million years of throwing at prey. Velerin looked at the screen, then at the data, then back at the screen. And for the first time in 31 years, he felt the faint, unmistakable beginning of doubt. Not about the data, about the framework, about the quiet assumption that had sat beneath every correct decision he had ever made. He whispered, without meaning to, we may have misunderstood what this is. Outside, the war had not yet begun. But something else had. Something slower. Something older. Something that did not stop once it started. Fleet Commander Davith Oren issued the invasion order 6 hours after the second human boarded the harmonic reach. There was no ceremony. No speeches. No declarations of intent. Just a sequence of commands, transmitted across the Quorum fleet with the precision of a system that had been doing this for 400 years. Advance. Secure orbital dominance. Neutralize hostile assets. Establish control. The language was clean, efficient, predictable, the kind of language that ended conflicts quickly. The fleet moved. For 1,000 ships adjusted formation in perfect synchronization, slipping through the outer edges of the Sol system like a blade entering water. No wasted motion. No hesitation. Every vessel knew its place. Every commander knew the plan. This was what the Quorum did best. This was what they had always done best. On Earth, the movement was not invisible. Human sensors tracked it. Not perfectly. Not with full understanding. But enough. Enough to know. The thing they had been preparing for had arrived. Across the planet, systems activated. Across nations, orders moved. Not unified. Not centralized. But aligned. Humanity did not become one. It did something stranger. Pointed in the same direction. The first engagement occurred near the orbit of Jupiter. It lasted for minutes. Quorum ships entered formation. Targeting solutions calculated. Human vessels, small, fast, and outmatched, attempted to engage. They were destroyed. Cleanly. Efficiently. 42 human ships reduced to debris and signal fragments before they could meaningfully respond. Quorum losses. None. The report read like a training exercise. On the flagship, Orin reviewed the data with quiet satisfaction. Expected, he said. The officers around him nodded. This was the geometry. This was how it worked. The next engagements followed the same pattern. Mars orbit. Saturn's outer rings. The asteroid belt. Each time, human ships appeared. Each time, they were faster than projections suggested. Each time, they were destroyed. The numbers accumulated. Human vessels destroyed. 41. Quorum vessels damaged. 11. Quorum vessels lost. 0. Clean. Controlled. Conclusive. On the 12th day, something changed. It did not announce itself. It did not arrive dramatically. Simply appeared. A small anomaly in the engagement logs. A human tactical unit approached from below the ecliptic plane. The angle was unusual. Not impossible. But tactically unsound. No military doctrine in the Quorum archive supported such a maneuver. Error? An analyst suggested. Possible, another replied. The engagement proceeded. The human ships were destroyed. As expected. The anomaly was logged. Then filed. Then forgotten. On the 19th day, the Quorum lost its first ship. It happened near Mars. A human squadron of 6 vessels engaged a formation of 14 Quorum ships. The outcome, according to every model, was predetermined. The human ships should have been destroyed within seconds. They were. 5 of them. The 6th did not behave correctly. Took a direct hit. Then another. Its hull integrity should have failed. The structure should have collapsed. It did not. Kept moving. Impossible, one of the engineers said, staring at the readouts. The human ship drove forward, straight into the center of the formation. It released something. The analysts would argue later about what it was. A weapon. A fragment. A piece of itself. Whatever it was, it struck 2 Quorum vessels simultaneously. Both lost engine function. In the confusion, the remaining human ships, already marked for destruction, adjusted, shifted, targeted. They destroyed one disabled vessel, crippled the other, then they died. All 6. The engagement ended. Quorum losses. 1 vessel destroyed. 1 abandoned. Human losses. Total. 6 ships. Orin read the report over his morning meal. He did not react immediately. He read it again. Then once more. The numbers still favored him. Overwhelmingly. But the shape of the engagement was wrong. He tapped the screen. Explain this, he said. The analyst hesitated. We believe the human vessel modified its structural tolerance thresholds, they said. It absorbed damage beyond expected limits. That is not an explanation, Orin said. It should have broken apart. Yes. It did not. Yes. The analyst swallowed. We are reviewing the material composition. Review faster, Orin said. He dismissed the report. But something remained. Not fear. Orin did not fear numbers. The numbers were still clean. The ratio was still absolute. What unsettled him was something else. A pattern he did not yet fully see. On the 25th day, the pattern became clearer. Human ships began appearing in places they should not have known to target. Minor blind spots, sensor gaps, formation edges. Each engagement was still a loss for them. They were still outgunned, still outnumbered, still destroyed. But each engagement was different. Not random, not chaotic, deliberate, adjusted. They are not repeating themselves, an officer said quietly. Oren did not respond. He was already seeing it. The tactics from day 1 were gone. The tactics from day 12 had been replaced. The tactics from day 19 had evolved again. No species in quorum history had done this. Not during active conflict. Doctrine was not something you changed in the middle of a war. It was too complex, too slow, too dependent on hierarchy. Humans did not appear to care. They were learning, in real time, from losses, from failures, from destruction. They are adapting, the officer said. Oren's voice was flat. Everything adapts. Not like this, the officer replied. Silence. Oren brought up the fleet numbers again. Quorum ships, 3,961. Human vessels, 40 minus losses. The ratio was still absurdly in his favor. And yet, he found himself watching the human entries in the log more closely than the quorum ones. He began to read them not as failures, but as information. That disturbed him more than anything else. On the station, Velarin Sol had not slept properly in 11 days. The war did not surround him. It did not press against his walls or shake his floor. It existed in data, in streams of numbers and reports and projections. And yet it occupied him completely. Mara Eth stood across from him, a new set of files in her hands. She looked different, not afraid, not panicked, but focused in a way that suggested something inside her had shifted. Show me, Velarin said. She placed the data on the shared display. Human evolutionary record, predator analysis, extinction patterns. Velarin had seen parts of it. Not like this, not assembled. Talk me through it, he said. Mara nodded. Every major predator humans competed with, she began, was larger, faster, and better equipped for direct confrontation. She highlighted the entries. Mass, speed, natural weapons. All of them, she continued, should have had a decisive advantage. Velarin nodded slowly. And yet, Mara brought up the extinction timelines. Gone, she said. Many of them disappear shortly after human expansion into their regions. Velarin stared at the data. The pattern was undeniable, repeated, consistent, uncomfortable. They did not overpower them, Mara said. They could not. No, they did not outrun them. No, they did not outfight them. Velarin leaned forward slightly. Then what did they do? Mara met his eyes. They followed, she said. Velarin frowned. Followed. Endurance pursuit, Mara said. You track the prey. You stay with it. You do not stop when it runs. You do not stop when it hides. You do not stop when it fights. She zoomed the data. Heart rate, thermal regulation, muscle endurance. You continue, she said. Past the point where any reasonable organism would stop. Velarin felt something tighten in his chest. You continue, Mara repeated. Until the prey cannot. Silence. Velarin looked back at the war data. Human ships. Destroyed. Again and again. And yet, returning. Changing. Learning. Continuing. They were built to outlast, he said quietly. Mara nodded. Yes. Velarin leaned back slowly. The room felt different now. Not colder. Not darker. Just clearer. He opened a new file. Marked it urgent. And for the first time since the war began, he began to understand what he was looking at. Not a species failing. Not a species losing. A species doing what it had always done. Following. Learning. And not stopping. On the 30th day of the war, the numbers still favored the quorum. That was the most dangerous part. Fleet Commander Davith Oren kept the numbers in front of him at all times. They floated on a dedicated display beside his command console, updated in real time, recalculated every few seconds, precise to the smallest measurable unit. Quorum vessels committed, 4,300. Operational, 3,961. Destroyed, 71. Damaged, 104. Human vessels initial count, 40. Destroyed, 37. It should have been over. By every model. By every precedent. By 400 years of accumulated certainty. And yet the war was still happening. Not escalating. Not collapsing. Continuing. Oren did not like continuations. Continuations implied variables that had not been accounted for. He studied the logs again. Day 1, human fleet engages directly. Destroyed. Day 12, off-axis approach. Ineffective but anomalous. Day 19, structural tolerance deviation. First quorum loss. Day 25, blind spot targeting. Pattern shift. Day 30, multivector engagement. Coordinated. He stared at the sequence. They are not following doctrine, one of his senior officers said. Oren shook his head. They are, he said. The officer frowned. This is not doctrine we recognize. No, Oren agreed. It is not ours. Silence. The officer hesitated. Then what is it? Oren did not answer immediately. He watched a replay of the latest engagement. Human ships moving in loose formation, breaking apart under fire, fragments scattering. Then, the fragments changed direction, reformed, struck from unexpected angles. Not efficiently, not cleanly, but effectively enough. They are learning, the officer said. Oren's jaw tightened slightly. Yes, he did not like the word. Learning was slow, structured, measured. This was not. This was immediate, reactive, uncontrolled. And yet, it worked. Not well, not decisively, but enough to matter. How many ships have they built? Oren asked. The analyst hesitated. We are still verifying. Answer. 412, the analyst said quietly. The room went still. Oren turned his head slowly. Repeat. 412 confirmed vessels, the analyst said. Constructed during active conflict. That is not possible. It has been revised 4 times, the analyst replied. Each revision underestimated the production rate. Oren looked back at the numbers. 40, then 300, then 400, in 30 days, while losing ships, while adapting tactics, while under continuous engagement. He felt it then, not fear, something adjacent, something without a name, the sensation of watching a pattern form that did not belong to any known system. They are accelerating, the officer said. They are responding, Oren corrected. To what? To us. Silence. Oren issued the order without looking away from the display. Request reinforcements, he said. 300 additional vessels. Approved within hours, came the reply. Of course, the quorum had resources. It always had resources. It always had more. The math would hold. It had to. On the station, Velarin Sol had stopped pretending he was working on anything else. The new research project had been approved in 6 minutes. Routine. Unremarkable. No one questioned it. No one understood what it was becoming. Mara Eth stood across from him again, new data in her hands. They had not spoken about sleep in days. Neither of them was getting any. Show me the stress response, Velarin said. Mara nodded. The display shifted. Human endocrine system, hormonal pathways, stress triggers, cortisol levels, adrenal response curves. Velarin had read the summary. He had not seen it like this. Not laid out. Not connected. For most species, Mara said, sustained threat produces cumulative degradation. She highlighted the curve. Stress compounds. Efficiency drops. Decision-making slows. Physical performance declines. Velarin nodded. Yes, that is the ceiling, Mara said. The biological limit. She switched the graph. The human curve appeared. It did not match. Velarin leaned forward. That is incorrect, he said. No, Mara replied quietly. It isn't. He stared at it. The spike, the drop, the stabilization, then the secondary rise. What is that? He asked. Mara did not look away from the screen. That is the part we did not understand, she said. She zoomed in. Under sustained existential threat, human cortisol spikes, then clears rapidly. Instead of accumulating, it cycles. Velarin's voice was quieter now. And the secondary rise? Adrenaline, Mara said. Pain suppression increases. Muscle efficiency increases. Cognitive processing, especially problem-solving, improves. Velarin felt something settle into place. Not comfortably, but completely. They get better, he said. Mara nodded. The more danger they are in, she said, the more capable they become. The room was silent. Velarin leaned back slowly. That is not a response, he said. No, that is a design. Mara hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Velarin turned away from the screen, walked once across the room, then back. He had spent his entire career classifying species according to patterns, growth curves, behavioral models, predictive frameworks, all of them built on one assumption, that intelligence moved away from violence, that given time, stability, and development, species left war behind. He turned back to Mara. We were wrong, he said. Mara did not argue. She did not soften it. Yes, she said. Velarin opened another file. Show me the social data. Mara did. Group cohesion, cooperation metrics, behavioral studies, conflict response. Velarin read, then stopped, then read again. This is reversed, he said. Yes, for every other species. Extended conflict fractures social bonds, Mara finished. Reduces cooperation, weakens group cohesion. Velarin looked back at the human data. They do not fracture, he said. No, they strengthen. Yes. Velarin exhaled slowly. They have a term for it, Mara said. What? She hesitated, searching for the closest translation. Brotherhood, she said. Camaraderie, shared struggle. They create new words for it in every conflict. Velarin closed his eyes briefly. War did not break them. It held them together. He opened them again. And the psychological recovery? He asked. Mara brought up the final dataset. Human trauma studies, recovery patterns, behavioral shifts. Velarin read in silence, then spoke. They do not simply survive it, he said. No, they reorganize around it. Yes, they become more functional. Mara nodded. They call it post-traumatic growth. Velarin stared at the screen. The phrase felt wrong. Not incorrect. Just insufficient. He turned away, walked to the edge of the room, looked at nothing, then spoke quietly. What do you call a species? He said. That gets stronger when you hurt it? Mara did not answer. There was no answer. Not one that fit. On the flagship, Orin watched the latest engagement. Human ships approached in scattered formation. Too loose, too exposed. Quorum targeting systems locked. Fired. 3 human vessels destroyed instantly. The remaining ships did not retreat, did not regroup. They changed. Mid-engagement. Vectors shifted. Formation dissolved. New angles. New patterns. Not efficient. Not optimal. But unexpected. One quorum vessel took a hit. Minor damage. But a hit. Orin felt it again. That unnamed sensation. Watching something learn. Not slowly. Not carefully. Immediately. From the moment it was hurt. They are rewriting doctrine in real time, the officer said. Orin's voice was flat. No species does that. They are. Silence. Orin looked at the numbers again. Still clean. Still in his favor. And yet, less certain. He spoke without looking away. How many ships do they have now? 412 confirmed. The analyst repeated. And growing. Orin nodded once. Then said something he had never said in 23 years of command. Adjust projections. The officer blinked. To what, Commander? Orin did not answer immediately, because for the first time, he did not know. The emergency session of the Quorum Council was called on the 32nd day of the war. This time, no one attended remotely. All 14 representatives were present in the chamber. In person. That alone said enough. Velarin Sol noticed the air the moment he entered. It had a weight to it. Not heavy. Not suffocating. Just used. Recycled too many times by too many minds working too quickly, too urgently, on something that did not fit into their understanding. He had never noticed it before. In 31 years, the chamber had always smelled like clean neutrality. Today it smelled like pressure. Fleet Commander Davith Orin stood at the far side of the room, arms folded behind his back, eyes fixed on the central display. He did not acknowledge Velarin's entrance. That was not unusual. What was unusual was that he was here at all. Military command did not attend scientific briefings. Not unless the science had become something else. Mara Eth stood to Velarin's right, slightly behind him. She had not been expected to speak. She had come anyway. Velarin did not object. He suspected he would need her. The chamber settled. The doors sealed. The noise of the station, distant, constant, fell away. Velarin stepped onto the platform. He did not begin with conclusions. He never did. Conclusions without structure were arguments. And arguments would not help here. He began with the oldest data. The earliest human artifacts, he said, predate all conventional markers of civilization. The display shifted. Stone tools appeared. Crude, sharp, purposeful. These are not agricultural tools, Velarin said. Not construction tools. They were not used to build shelter or cultivate food. He paused. They were used against moving targets. Silence. He did not fill it. He moved forward. 2 million years, he said. The number hung in the air. He did not repeat it. He did not explain it. He let it exist. Then he shifted the display. Megafauna. Large animals. Massive. Fast. Armed by nature with claws, teeth, hide. Every major predator humans competed with, Velarin said, possessed decisive physical advantages. He did not dramatize. He simply listed them. Size, speed, natural weapons. Then he brought up the timelines. Extinction patterns. Human expansion. The lines matched, too closely to ignore. They did not overpower these animals, Velarin said. No, he answered himself quietly. They did not outrun them. No, they outlasted them. Mara's earlier words echoed in the chamber, though she had not yet spoken. Velarin continued. Endurance pursuit, he said. They followed prey beyond the point of exhaustion, beyond the point of rational cessation. They did not stop. He let that settle. Then he shifted again. Biology, the shoulder joint, the kinetic analysis. Their physiology supports this, he said. Projectile optimization, structural endurance, pain tolerance beyond expected thresholds. Graphs appeared. Hormone curves, stress responses. This is not incidental, Velarin said. This is not a byproduct of intelligence. It is foundational. A representative from the Velkai leaned forward. You are suggesting design, they said. Velarin met their gaze. I am suggesting evolution under sustained lethal pressure, he said. In biological terms, the distinction is minimal. Silence. He moved to the next section. Psychology. Under sustained threat, he said. Most species degrade. Graphs appeared. Falling curves. Braking systems. Humans do not. He showed the human data. The spike. The drop. The rise. They improve, Velarin said. He did not soften it. He did not qualify it. The more danger they are in, the more capable they become. The chamber remained still. No one interrupted. No one questioned. He moved to the final section. Social bonding. This is where our framework fails most completely, he said. He brought up comparative data. Species after species. Conflict leading to fragmentation. Collapse. Isolation. Then he showed the human pattern. It inverted. They strengthen, Velerin said. Under prolonged conflict, human social bonds intensify. Cooperation increases. Group cohesion becomes more stable, not less. Mara spoke then, quietly. They generate language for it, she said. New words, new structures of belonging. They build identity around shared struggle. Velerin did not look at her, but he was aware of her presence in a way he had not been before. He continued. They do not break under pressure, he said. They consolidate. Silence. Longer now. He could feel the chamber changing. The representatives were no longer listening as they had at the beginning. They were recalibrating, adjusting internal models, searching for a place to put this information. Velerin knew that feeling. He had lived in it for the past 2 weeks. He took a breath, then stepped into the part of the briefing he had not wanted to give. We classified human aggression as cultural, he said. That was incorrect. No one spoke. No one objected. He continued. The data does not support aggression as a surface behavior, he said. It supports aggression as a structural component of the species. He paused, then said the sentence clearly. It is not a phase. The words landed. Hard. A representative from the Laurenti spoke. Then what is it? Velerin answered without hesitation. It is the foundation. Silence filled the chamber. Not empty, not uncertain, heavy. Oren shifted slightly in the corner. Velerin noticed. For the first time since the briefing began, the commander was fully engaged. Velerin continued. They are not a war species in the sense we understand, he said. They do not pursue conflict for its own sake. He chose his next words carefully. They are a drive species. The term hung in the air, undefined, new, necessary. Whatever they commit to, Velerin said, they pursue with total allocation of effort. War, construction, exploration, art, social bonding. He looked around the chamber. They do not operate in partial states. He paused. They do not have a concept of halfway. Mara added softly. They do not stop. Velerin did not correct her, because it was accurate. He turned to the final question. The conflict, he said, has not followed expected patterns. He switched the display. Numbers appeared. Dated. Revised. Uncomfortable. Initial human fleet. 40 vessels. He let that sit. Current human fleet. 412. The chamber shifted. Physically. Not dramatically. But enough. They built them, one representative said. Velerin nodded. During active conflict, he said, while sustaining losses, while adapting tactics. He advanced the display. Projections. Within 60 days, he said, current models estimate a fleet size between 1,200 and 1,500 vessels. No one spoke. No one moved. The numbers did not make sense. Not within any known framework. Oren finally spoke. His voice was steady, but there was something under it now. Not fear. Not yet. Something closer. The ratio still favors us, he said. Velerin met his gaze. Yes, he said, then added. But the ratio is no longer the correct measurement. Silence. Oren frowned slightly. Explain. Velerin did. We are measuring static capacity, he said. They are operating as a dynamic system. He gestured to the engagement logs. Each loss produces adaptation. Each failure produces variation. Each variation is communicated and integrated across units. Mara stepped forward slightly. Their command structure is decentralized, she said. Unit-level autonomy, local decision-making, rapid information sharing. She hesitated, then finished. The learning is happening everywhere at once. A representative whispered. That is not a military. Velerin answered. No. He looked at the data, then back at the chamber. It is closer to an immune system. The words settled into the room like something that had been waiting to be said. Oren did not move, but Velerin saw it. The moment the idea connected, the moment the framework shifted, the moment the war stopped being predictable. Velerin took a breath, then asked the question he knew they were all holding. How much force, he said, constitutes overwhelming force against a system that becomes more efficient under pressure? No one answered, because the answer required a number, and the number did not exist. After a long silence, the oldest representative in the chamber spoke. Is there a path to negotiation? Velerin did not hesitate. Yes. The word landed differently than everything that had come before. Hope, or something like it. They understand negotiation, he said. They initiated contact after the first failure. They sent a single individual, unarmed. He looked at Tarisvel, who stood at the edge of the chamber. They are not unwilling to talk, he said. He paused, then added, but they will not negotiate from weakness. Silence again, different now. Focused, sharp. Velerin finished. If we continue escalation, he said, they will continue to adapt. If we shift, he said, to acknowledgement of mutual standing. He let the sentence complete itself. No one needed it spoken. The chamber remained quiet. Then Orin turned, without a word, and left. Velerin watched him go. Mara stood beside him. Neither of them spoke, because there was nothing left to say that would make this simpler. Only one thing remained, whether the quorum would understand. Before it was too late, Fleet Commander Davith Orin did not return to the council chamber. He went straight back to the command deck. The doors sealed behind him with a soft, final sound. For a long moment he stood without moving, staring at the main tactical display. The war was still unfolding, numbers still updating, engagements still resolving. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had. He replayed Velerin's words in his mind. Not a phase, structural, an immune system. He did not like metaphors. They were imprecise, but this one mapped too well. Current engagement status, he said. The analyst responded immediately. Outer system engagements ongoing. Human fleet now at 506 confirmed vessels. Production continuing. Orin's jaw tightened slightly. Losses. Human losses increasing. Quorum losses also increasing. Define increasing. The analyst hesitated. Nonlinear, they said. Orin did not like that answer. Show me. The display shifted. Engagement curves. Loss ratios. Time progression. At first glance, it still favored the quorum. Heavier losses on the human side. Fewer ships remaining. Less firepower. But when plotted over time, the curve bent. Human losses remained high, but quorum losses were accelerating. Not dramatically, not yet, but enough. Enough to matter. They are finding us, one officer said quietly. Not finding, Orin corrected. Understanding. Silence. They do not break under pressure, he said. They consolidate. Silence. Longer now. He could feel the chamber changing. The representatives were no longer listening as they had at the beginning. They were recalibrating, adjusting internal models, searching for a place to put this information. Velerin knew that feeling. He had lived in it for the past 2 weeks. He took a breath, then stepped into the part of the briefing he had not wanted to give. We classified human aggression as cultural, he said. That was incorrect. No one spoke. No one objected. He continued. The data does not support aggression as a surface behavior, he said. It supports aggression as a structural component of the species. He paused, then said the sentence clearly. It is not a phase. The words landed. Hard. A representative from the Laurenti spoke. Then what is it? Velerin answered without hesitation. It is the foundation. Silence filled the chamber. Not empty. Not uncertain. Heavy. Orin shifted slightly in the corner. Velerin noticed. For the first time since the briefing began, the commander was fully engaged. Velerin continued. They are not a war species in the sense we understand, he said. They do not pursue conflict for its own sake. He chose his next words carefully. They are a drive species. The term hung in the air, undefined. new, necessary. Whatever they commit to, Velerin said, they pursue with total allocation of effort. War, construction, exploration, art, social bonding. He looked around the chamber. They do not operate in partial states. He paused. They do not have a concept of halfway. Mara added softly, they do not stop. Velerin did not correct her, because it was accurate. He turned to the final question. The conflict, he said, has not followed expected patterns. He switched the display. Numbers appeared, dated, revised, uncomfortable. Initial human fleet, 40 vessels. He let that sit. Current human fleet, 412. The chamber shifted, physically, not dramatically, but enough. They built them, one representative said. Velerin nodded. During active conflict, he said, while sustaining losses, while adapting tactics. He advanced the display. Projections. Within 60 days, he said, current models estimate a fleet size between 1,200 and 1,500 vessels. No one spoke. No one moved. The numbers did not make sense. Not within any known framework. Oren finally spoke. His voice was steady, but there was something under it now. Not fear. Not yet. Something closer. The ratio still favors us, he said. Velerin met his gaze. Yes, he said, then added, but the ratio is no longer the correct measurement. Silence. Oren frowned slightly. Explain. Velerin did. We are measuring static capacity, he said. They are operating as a dynamic system. He gestured to the engagement logs. Each loss produces adaptation. Each failure produces variation. Each variation is communicated and integrated across units. Mara stepped forward slightly. Their command structure is decentralized, she said. Unit-level autonomy, local decision-making, rapid information sharing. She hesitated, then finished. The learning is happening everywhere at once. A representative whispered. That is not a military. Velerin answered. No. He looked at the data, then back at the chamber. It is closer to an immune system. The word settled into the room like something that had been waiting to be said. Oren did not move, but Velerin saw it. The moment the idea connected, the moment the framework shifted, the moment the war stopped being predictable. Velerin took a breath, then asked the question he knew they were all holding. How much force, he said, constitutes overwhelming force against a system that becomes more efficient under pressure? No one answered, because the answer required a number, and the number did not exist. After a long silence, the oldest representative in the chamber spoke. Is there a path to negotiation? Velerin did not hesitate. Yes. The word landed differently than everything that had come before. Hope, or something like it. They understand negotiation, he said. They initiated contact after the first failure. They sent a single individual, unarmed. He looked at Tarisvel, who stood at the edge of the chamber. They are not unwilling to talk, he said. He paused, then added, but they will not negotiate from weakness. Silence again. Different now. Focused. Sharp. Velerin finished. If we continue escalation, he said, they will continue to adapt. If we shift, he said, to acknowledgement of mutual standing. He let the sentence complete itself. No one needed it spoken. The chamber remained quiet. Then Oren turned, without a word, and left. Velerin watched him go. Mara stood beside him. Neither of them spoke, because there was nothing left to say that would make this simpler. Only one thing remained, whether the quorum would understand. Before it was too late, Fleet Commander Davith Oren did not return to the council chamber. He went straight back to the command deck. The doors sealed behind him with a soft, final sound. For a long moment he stood without moving, staring at the main tactical display. The war was still unfolding, numbers still updating, engagements still resolving. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had. He replayed Velerin's words in his mind. Not a phase. Structural. An immune system. He did not like metaphors. They were imprecise. But this one mapped. Too well. Current engagement status, he said. The analyst responded immediately. Outer system engagements ongoing. Human fleet now at 506 confirmed vessels. Production continuing. Oren's jaw tightened slightly. Losses. Human losses increasing. Quorum losses also increasing. Define increasing. The analyst hesitated. Nonlinear, they said. Oren did not like that answer. Show me. The display shifted. Engagement curves. Loss ratios. Time progression. At first glance, it still favored the quorum. Heavier losses on the human side. Fewer ships remaining. Less firepower. But when plotted over time, the curve bent. Human losses remained high. But quorum losses were accelerating. Not dramatically. Not yet. But enough. Enough to matter. They are finding us, one officer said quietly. Not finding, Oren corrected. Understanding. Silence. He watched another engagement replay. Human ships approached in a scattered formation. Quorum targeting locked. Fired. 3 human vessels destroyed instantly. The remaining ships changed. Not after. Not between engagements. During. Vectors shifted mid-fire. Angles altered. Patterns dissolved and reformed in ways that did not follow command hierarchy. There was no central signal. No delay. No waiting. Each unit responded independently. And yet, the response propagated. One adjustment became many. One success became pattern. They are communicating in real time, the analyst said. Faster than our command chain, another added. Oren said nothing. He did not need to. He could see it. The shape of it. A system that did not rely on instruction. A system that reacted. Adapted. Spread information like. He stopped the thought. He did not want the word. But it was already there. Like a body. He exhaled slowly. Then issued the order. Commit reinforcements immediately. All units? An officer asked. All, Oren said. If we escalate, they escalate, the officer said carefully. Oren turned his head slightly. They are already escalating. The officer hesitated, then nodded. Orders moved. 300 additional quorum ships entered the Sol system within hours. The largest concentration of force the quorum had deployed in a single theater in over a century. The geometry was overwhelming. It had to be. It always had been. On Earth, the additional fleet movement was detected within minutes. Not fully understood. Not precisely measured. But recognized. The scale had changed. In underground command centers, the response was immediate. Not panic. Not confusion. Adjustment. Production increased. Factories accelerated beyond planned capacity. Supply chains rerouted. Civilian industries converted. The distinction between military and non-military blurred. Not officially. Not declared. But in practice. Across continents, new vessels began construction before the previous ones had fully left their docks. Some designs were incomplete. Some were inefficient. Some were unstable. They were built anyway, because the goal was not perfection. The goal was continuation. In orbit, human ships launched in waves. Not in clean formations. Not in structured fleets. But in numbers. Constant. Flowing. On the station, Velarin Sol watched the data change. Not slowly. Not incrementally. But visibly. The projections he had built 2 days earlier no longer held. The numbers had already exceeded them. Mara Eth stood beside him, silent. She did not need to speak. They both saw it. Update the model, Velarin said. Mara did. The system recalculated. Adjusted. Rebuilt its assumptions. The new projection appeared. Velarin stared at it. Then said, very quietly, that is not sustainable. Mara did not respond immediately. Then, for us, she said. Velarin closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. He turned back to the screen. Show me the doctrine changes. Mara brought them up. Day 1, direct engagement. Day 12, off-axis approach. Day 19, structural tolerance adaptation. Day 25, blind spot targeting. Day 30, multivector fragmentation. Day 33, decentralized swarm response. Velerin read the list, then said, "They are not replacing doctrine." Mara looked at him. "No, they are adding to it." She understood immediately. Yes. Velerin felt the final piece settle. "They are not discarding failed strategies," he said. "They are integrating them." Mara nodded slowly. "A cumulative system." Velerin exhaled. "That does not converge," he said. "No, it expands." "Yes." Silence. Velerin turned away from the screen, walked once across the room, then back. "They will not stabilize," he said. "No. They will not plateau. No. They will continue until—" He stopped, because the sentence did not have an end he wanted to say. Mara finished it quietly. "Until there is nothing left to adapt to." On the flagship, Orin watched the largest engagement of the war. It began as expected. Quorum fleet in dominant formation. Human ships entering from multiple vectors. Disorganized. Exposed. Destroyed. Then, something shifted. Not in one place. Everywhere. Human ships stopped behaving like individual units. They began behaving like— He forced himself to think it. A system. One group drew fire. Another exploited the gap. A third adjusted based on the outcome. There was no command delay. No visible coordination. And yet, the pattern spread. Like signal. No. He would not use that word again. A quorum vessel took a hit. Then another. Then a third. Small damage. Individually insignificant. Collectively, not. "They are distributing impact," an officer said. "Across the fleet. They are forcing us to respond everywhere at once." Orin did not move. He watched. He calculated. He adjusted. And for the first time in 23 years of command, he realized he was reacting. Not controlling. Not directing. Responding. To them. The engagement ended. Quorum losses higher than projected. Human losses, also high, but irrelevant, because the number of human ships in the next engagement was higher. Again, Orin turned away from the display, slowly, carefully, as if sudden movement might break something fragile. He spoke, quietly, to no one in particular. "This does not end with numbers." No one answered, because no one had an answer. 3 days later, the Quorum Council sent the first draft of a negotiation offer. It was rejected, not by humanity, by the Council itself. The language was wrong, too heavy, too certain, too familiar. They tried again. Second draft. Rejected. Third. Rejected. Each one carried the same flaw. They were written as offers, as statements of position, as extensions of authority. Finally, an aide, young, unremarkable, unnoticed until that moment, spoke. "We are writing it incorrectly," she said. The chamber turned. "How?" one representative asked. She hesitated, then said, "We are writing as if we are giving them something." Silence. She swallowed, then finished. "We should be asking." The room held that idea, turned it, examined it, and slowly accepted it. The fifth draft was different, shorter, simpler, no declarations, no assumptions, just acknowledgement. The conflict had not proceeded as expected. A continued engagement would be costly. A resolution would be preferable. They were prepared to discuss terms. At a time and place of humanity's choosing. It was not an offer. It was a request. The message was sent. Then the waiting began. 6 days. Quiet. Not the frantic silence of the first contact. Not the hidden storm. This was different. Measured. Controlled. Like a decision being made slowly. Carefully. On the station, Velerin used the time to finish his report. Not the emergency submission. The full document. The complete structure. From the earliest artifacts to the present moment. He wrote slowly, because writing forced him to think, and thinking forced him to accept what he was seeing. He was on the 43rd page when Mara entered without knocking. She had never done that before. He did not question it. She placed a datapad on his desk. He looked at it. Cultural analysis. Mythology, she said. Velerin frowned slightly. Explain. She did. Human origin stories. Across cultures. Across continents. Across time. He read. Then stopped. Then read again. Every species the quorum had catalogued began with the same story. Harmony. Creation. Balance. A beginning that was whole. Humans did not. Their stories began with struggle, conflict, trial, survival. Their earliest heroes were not creators, not builders, not harmonizers. They were survivors, fighters, those who endured, those who went into the dark and came back, changed. Velerin felt something inside him settle into its final shape. This is not cultural, he said. No, Mara replied. They did not learn this. No, they built their culture around it. Mara nodded. They were already this, she said. Velerin looked at the datapad, then at his report, then back at the datapad. He picked up his stylus and wrote a single line at the top of the document. We classified their war as a phase. He paused, then added, we were wrong about what it was a phase of. He did not write anything else for a long time, because for the first time, he understood the answer, and it was not one the quorum had ever needed before. Not for any other species. Not in 400 years. On the 7th day, humanity responded. The message was brief. A location. A time. 3 names. The first name on the list. Commander Daniel Oa. Ambassador Taris Vel read it twice. Then once more. And without fully understanding why, she looked down at her own hands. They were not still. They never were. No one's were. Except his. And now, she understood what she had seen. Not calm. Not confidence. Not absence of fear. Something else. Something deeper. Something that did not need to move, because it had already decided. The meeting took place at the edge of the Sol system. A neutral station. No territorial claim. No symbolic advantage. Just distance, emptiness, and the quiet agreement that whatever happened here would not be influenced by who owned the ground beneath it. Ambassador Taris Vel arrived first. She stood in the reception chamber, reviewing the final translation matrices one last time. The software had been revised again and again since the first contact failure. Every phrase now carried multiple contextual interpretations, layered redundancies, safeguards against ambiguity. It would not be perfect, but it would be better. It had to be. The doors opened. Commander Daniel Oa entered. 2 others followed him, one older, one younger, but Taris barely registered them at first. Her attention went to Oa. Always to Oa. He walked the same way, measured, controlled, certain, and his hands, still, completely still, not clenched, not rigid, just unmoving. Taris felt the same quiet realization she had felt when reading the briefing summary. This was not discipline. This was structure. They took their places. No ceremony. No extended greetings. No attempt to soften the moment. Wei spoke first. Let's keep this simple, he said. The translator rendered it cleanly. Taris inclined her head. Agreed. Silence settled. Not uncomfortable. Defined. Clear. Oa placed a small data pad on the table between them. These are our terms, he said. No introduction. No framing. No positioning. Just terms. Taris glanced at the pad, then back at him. You're not going to negotiate? She asked. Oa met her gaze. We are, he said. This is the negotiation. Taris picked up the pad. Read, then slowed, then read again. The terms were unexpected. No territorial demands. No resource claims. No punitive measures for the lunar strike. No attempt to leverage their recent performance in the war. Instead, mutual recognition of sovereignty, immediate cessation of hostilities, shared access to quorum diplomatic networks, human representation within the Quorum Council, equal to founding species, technology exchange frameworks, and one final clause, simple, clear, unambiguous. Any act of aggression against humanity will be considered an act of aggression against the Quorum as a whole. Taris read that line 3 times, then looked up. You're not asking for reparations, she said. No. You're not asking for territory. No. You're not asking for advantage. Wei tilted his head slightly. We already have what we need, he said. Taris held his gaze. Then what is this? Wei's expression did not change. It's a perimeter. The word landed cleanly. Not emotional. Not symbolic. Practical. We're not interested in punishment, he continued. We're interested in making sure this doesn't happen again. Taris felt something shift in her understanding. Not of the terms. Of the intent. You could have asked for more, she said. Wei nodded. Yes. Why didn't you? He did not hesitate. Because we're not trying to win, he said. Taris blinked. Then what are you trying to do? Wei answered simply. Finish. The word carried weight. Not finality. Completion. Taris looked back at the terms. Then at the 2 humans beside him. They had not spoken. But they were watching. Not passively. Not nervously. Assessing. Present. Like Wei. All of them. She understood then what Velarin had meant. Drive species. Not halfway. Not partial. Everything. Always. She set the pad down. These terms will be accepted, she said. Wei nodded once. I know. No arrogance. No assumption. Just confidence. Not in the outcome. In the process. Taris allowed herself a small breath. Then asked the question she had been holding since the war began. You're not angry, she said. Wei looked at her. Not surprised. Not offended. Just considering. No, he said. Taris frowned slightly. You should be. Maybe, Wei said. But that wouldn't help. Silence. Taris leaned forward slightly. You lost ships, she said. People. Yes. You were attacked without warning. Yes. And you're not angry? Wei's eyes held hers. For a moment she thought he might not answer. Then he did. We were, he said. Past tense. Clean. Contained. Taris felt the distinction. You're not now. No. Why? Wei leaned back slightly. Not relaxed. Balanced. Because anger is for when you don't understand what's happening, he said. We understand. The room went quiet. Taris felt it. The shift. The clarity. This was not a species reacting. This was a species that had already processed. Already adapted. Already moved forward. You destroyed our moon, Wei said. Not accusing. Not emotional. Just fact. We responded. We adapted. We solved the problem. He gestured lightly to the datapad. This is the solution. Taris looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, she understood what had been wrong in that first meeting. She had assumed he was reacting. He had already finished reacting. He had moved past it. Faster than she had thought possible. We thought you were escalating, she said quietly. Wei shook his head. We were, he said, then added. But not in the way you think. Taris waited. Wei continued. You escalated force, he said. We escalated understanding. The sentence settled into the room like something inevitable. Taris closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. There's one thing I don't understand, she said. Wei tilted his head slightly. What? You could have kept fighting, she said. You were adapting faster than we could respond. Wei considered that, then nodded. Yes. So why stop? Wei looked at her. And for the first time, there was something there. Not emotion. Not exactly. But something close. Because we don't fight for the sake of it, he said. We fight to reach a point where we don't have to anymore. Silence. Taris felt it settle. Deep. Complete. She nodded once. then extended her hand. A human gesture. Learned. Intentional. Wei looked at it, then took it. His grip was firm. Controlled. Final. The agreement was made. On the station, Velarin Sol received the summary 6 hours later. He read it once, then again, then a third time, not because it was unclear, because it was unexpected. He had prepared for harsh terms, for imbalance, for the mathematics of victory. Instead, he found restraint, structure, clarity. He focused on one line. This is a perimeter. Velarin leaned back slowly. They're not retaliating, he said. Mara stood beside him. No. They're defining. Yes. Velarin exhaled. They're done. Mara nodded. Yes. He looked back at the report, then at his own, at the line he had written at the top. We were wrong about what it was a phase of. He understood now. Completely. Humanity had not been passing through war. They had been built in it, shaped by it, and then they had built everything else around it. Velarin spoke quietly. They don't carry war the way we thought. Mara looked at him. No. They carry it like a tool. Mara considered that, then nodded. Yes. Velarin closed the file. For the first time in weeks, he felt something settle. Not relief, not comfort, understanding. And understanding was enough. Velarin Sol finished the report 4 days after the treaty was signed. He did not rush it. He could have. The conclusions were already clear. The data had settled weeks ago. The council had acted. The war had ended. But Velarin had spent 31 years building a reputation on one thing, being precise. And precision, he had learned, required patience, especially when the thing you were describing did not fit into any framework you already had. He sat in his office, the same room that smelled of old paper and cold light, and read the final section again. He had structured it carefully. Archaeology first, then biology, then psychology, then culture. Each piece laid down in sequence, each one building toward something that could not be avoided. He reached the conclusion, read it slowly, then, for the last time, made a small adjustment. Not to the data, to the language. He wanted it to be exact. He wanted it to be understood. He began. We approached this species with a framework built on a single assumption, that intelligence trends toward peace. He paused, then continued, that given sufficient development, sufficient stability, sufficient time, the violent phase of a civilization gives way to something calmer, something more suited to coexistence. He leaned back slightly, let the sentence settle, then wrote the next line. This framework has been correct for every species we have encountered. He stopped, looked at the words, then finished the thought. It is incorrect for humanity. The room was quiet, not heavy, not tense, just still. Velarin continued. Not because humanity is incapable of peace. The recent negotiation demonstrates clearly that they are not only capable of coexistence, but will choose it when approached with honesty and mutual respect. He paused again, because this was the part that mattered, the part that had taken him the longest to accept. The error was in the premise. He wrote the next line slowly. We assumed that in humanity, as in all other species we know, the drive toward peace was the core, and the capacity for war was a layer on top. A phase, a vestige, something the deeper self was moving away from. He looked at the screen, then added, the evidence suggests the opposite. He did not rush the next sentences. He wrote them one at a time, carefully. The peace is genuine. The creativity is genuine. The art, the music, the social bonds, these are not illusions. He exhaled softly, then finished. But beneath all of it, older than all of it, is something else. He did not name it immediately. He let the space exist. Then, something shaped by 2 million years of being smaller, slower, and weaker than the things that wanted to kill it. Something that learned, over that time, that the only reliable response to a threat is not strength, but endurance. Velarin's hands rested on the desk. Still, for a moment. Then he continued. We did not encounter a civilization that had not yet grown past its war. We encountered a civilization that had grown into everything else while keeping it. He paused, then added the final metaphor. It had come to him 2 days earlier, and it had not left. Like a tree that grows around a stone. The tree expands, changes, reaches toward light, but the stone remains. It is part of the structure. It always will be. Velerin read the paragraph, then wrote the final lines. The appropriate response is not fear. The appropriate response is not aggression. The appropriate response is to remember which side of the perimeter you are on. He stopped, looked at the document, and for the first time since the war had begun, he did not feel the need to revise it. He submitted the report, marked for full council distribution, then turned off his screen. The room dimmed slightly. The hum of the machines continued. Outside, the station moved through space, quiet and unchanged. Inside, Velerin Sol sat back in his chair and did nothing, which, for him, was unusual. He had another file waiting. A new species, water world. Preliminary scans suggested peaceful development. No evidence of organized conflict. He would read it. Soon. But not yet. On Earth, life resumed. Not immediately. Not cleanly. But steadily. Cities that had prepared for war shifted back to ordinary motion. Factories slowed but did not stop. Shipyards remained active. Not at wartime levels. But not idle either. The sky for a while was watched more carefully. Then less. Then, normally, children returned to playing in open spaces. In one city, in one yard on one quiet afternoon, a girl stood alone with a stick in her hand. She was 7 years old. Maybe 8. It did not matter. She pointed the stick at something moving in the grass. A bird. A shadow. An idea. She made a sound. A sharp, bright imitation of an explosion. The kind children made without thinking. Without being taught. Without needing to understand. She laughed, dropped the stick, and ran toward something else. Already finished with the game. Already somewhere new. Above her, unseen, a quorum observation drone recorded the moment. Routine. Unremarkable. Captured the image. Stored it. Uploaded it to the general archive. No flags. No alerts. No analysis. Just another piece of data among thousands. On the station, Mara Eth watched the footage. She had not meant to. It had appeared in her daily review feed. Standard observational intake. She almost skipped it. Almost. But something she would not later be able to name what made her pause. She watched the clip. Once. Then again. The child. The stick. The sound. The laughter. The movement. Simple. Ordinary. Harmless. Mara sat very still. For a long time. Then she opened her private notes. Not the official record. Not the report. Just a blank page. She wrote a single line. They were playing at it before they understood what it was. She looked at the sentence. Considered adding more. Did not. She closed the file. Did not submit it. Some things she had learned did not need to be said out loud. Understanding them was enough. Across the station, Velerin Sol picked up the new file. Water world. Peaceful species. Communal. No recorded conflict. He began reading. Carefully. Thoroughly. The way he always had. But something had changed. Not in the process. In the assumption. He no longer began with certainty. He began with a question. And somewhere, far beyond the station, around a yellow star that now knew it was no longer alone. A species that had spent 2 million years learning how to outlast everything that tried to destroy it looked up at the stars. Not with fear. Not with wonder alone. But with something deeper. Recognition. And then, as they always did, they went back to work.